Hey, before I get into this one, there's a few disclaimers I want to make. Um, First disclaimer is I don't consider myself a never Trumper. That is to say, I am not of the school of thought that criticize Trump for the sake of criticizing him, i.e., no matter what he does, I'll criticize him. I'm not of that school of thought. I believe some people on the left are, and they will always find an angle to attack him. It's not my position. I will give Trump credit where credit is due, but with this president, I do struggle to find it, quite frankly. Um, I think that there's this tendency for Trump supporters, and by this I mean not people who are they kind of reluctantly support him, but people who are enthusiastically supporting him. They have this tendency to assume that anyone who criticizes Trump is a liberal or a lefty, or they'll even get into conspiracy theories about it. And there is a disturbing correlation between, as I see it, hardcore Trump supporters and conspiracy theories about, for example, the New World Order. I mean, if you look at a lot of the attitudes that come from hardcore Trump supporters, there's really not much difference between that sort of mindset and the sort of mindset you would see following the likes of Alex Jones. And I think that's not at all surprising. Trump's a demagogue, and he's been very effective at that. He's very effectively tapped into it. I think he's a complete hypocrite and a charlatan. Far from cleaning up the swamp, I think he's helped create a very big swamp. Um, and I just think if I were an American, I would feel utterly disillusioned right now. One reason for that is because I don't think Biden is a particularly inspiring candidate. I think at core he's probably a decent man. He's certainly got plenty of experience. But Biden has real weaknesses as well. Sometimes his age shows. I also think that the areas where Trump is going to undoubtedly attack him on, probably China and law and order, Biden isn't really being assertive on that. He's nowhere near as vocal on China as I would like to see. He could be a lot more vocal on human rights issues and also China's malevolent influence against Western states. Biden could be a lot more vocal on that. Instead, he's played the sort of narrative of, well, criticizing the CCP somehow equates to xenophobia, which is a lot of nonsense. Trump will play to that. I also think, last 2 months there's been a lot of violence in the United States, a lot of rioting, disorder, looting. It's one thing pandering to Black Lives Matter, but Biden also needs to show that he will be on the side of law and order and condemn unequivocally um, violence. I looked at the Biden website a while back, and there's a lot of things there, very liberal positions about criminal justice reform and the prison population of the United States and so on. They're all valid positions, but at a time, when there has been disorder, a candidate who's on the side of, you know, um, talking about those sort of positions can appear weak. Rightly or wrongly, that could be the perception. Um, we'll never know what would have happened in 1968 with the events that unfolded with Robert Kennedy, but I personally think that any Democrat would have lost that year, including RFK. And that sounds harsh to say, but I think Nixon effectively managed to portray the Democrats as having lost control. Um, so this year it's a little bit the disorder is on a Republican's watch, but the Democrat that's challenging him, might appear weak in that area. So what Biden needs to do is certainly make himself different from Trump, listen to concerns of the black community, but also say, I'm also on the side of law and order, and I'm not going to be afraid to condemn looters and rioters, because that's an area that Trump's going to attack him on. But I used to understand how people can how any intelligent person can still support Trump. I really don't. And I know some people might be offended by that, but I have a theory about this. I think that there are people who are not necessarily Trump lovers, but they sort of see him as an answer to the woke thing. And I've been very vocal on that. I am no fan of um, woke politics at all. I think it's intolerant, I think it's hypocritical, and I think it's divisive. And I haven't shied away from my thoughts on that. But I think it's a mistake to see Donald Trump as kind of a natural bulwark to that. I honestly think Donald Trump cares only about Donald Trump. I don't even see this as particularly a left right issue. I see it as Donald Trump versus decency and leadership. That's not to say Biden provides leadership necessarily, but I honestly think Biden, whatever weaknesses he has, I mean, look at his campaign speeches, look at his stances on coronavirus. I think he's definitely been stronger on that than Trump. He's made it about the American people, not about himself. Trump has openly questioned doctors. I mean, this is getting into pure Alex Jones conspiracy theory territory. It's dangerous. And whilst I don't think that Donald Trump can be blamed for all the problems in America, I don't think his leadership, his lack of leadership, has helped. This is a president who literally a few days ago implied that he was thinking about suspending the election. This has never happened in American history. Even in the midst of the Civil War and two world wars, it hasn't happened. Trump to even mull on that says a lot. Um, there's limited evidence of voter fraud regarding the balloting that Trump is using to justify this. I mean, he can't do it anyway, he doesn't have the power to do it, but there's limited evidence of that. There's been some cases, but certainly not to the extent that would justify suspending the election. I think the truth is Trump's desperate. I think he knows he's drilling in the opinion polls. And yes, we need to be cautious about that. Yes, they can be wrong. Biden's, smart not to be too complacent there. They have been wrong. They were wrong on Brexit and they were wrong on Trump's election. But if they are wrong about this and Trump wins, then it'll be, their biggest mistake. I think the truth is a lot of Americans are disillusioned with the lack of leadership coming from this president. I mean, bear in mind, in 2016, Trump lost the popular vote. He won by the Electoral College vote. To me, that's significant because a president that can't break beyond their support base, I don't see how he can get re-elected. From what I can tell, I haven't come across anyone, and I'm sure they'll be out there, but I haven't come across anyone saying that they were critical of Trump in 2016 and they've suddenly been converted to Trump in 2020. Sure, his supporters are very enthusiastic and they will vocally defend him no matter what he does. I mean, Trump could literally murder someone and they'll defend him. They'll say it's all fake news. It's profoundly dangerous how Trump has managed to do that. Morph every critique into fake news. Of course, there's bias in the media. Of course, CNN. I don't particularly like CNN. I think their coverage of racial issues is lamentable. I think that there is huge bias there, no question about it. Are they going to say that Fox News is part of the leftist agenda? Come off it. I mean, there comes a point when you have to stop making excuses and just say, okay, this time he's gone too far. I don't know what it is going to take. I mean, this is a president who, at the start of the pandemic, actually supported insurrection. against state governors. Of course, now sending in federal troops into, or rather, National Guard into Portland. But I mean, for him to support the armed militias at the start of the pandemic against governors who were imposing lockdown measures used around the world, is an absolute disgrace. And I cannot think of a time in modern history that that's happened. I even struggle to think of a time in presidential history where that's ever happened. Where you've had a sitting president advocate insurrection against state governors, armed insurrection. And no, I don't consider Lyndon Johnson's usage of federal troops against, for example, George Wallace in the 60s as comparable, because it was different circumstances completely. It wasn't armed militias, taking matters into their own hands. It was largely peaceful civil rights activists. There's huge differences. But all the areas that Trump supporters praise him on can be challenged. Law and order, like I've just said, he's advocated armed insurgency. That's not exactly on the side of law and order. When you have armed idiots barging into a state capital, the president should be condemning that instead of praising it. Um, China, well, on the surface, you could say Trump's tough on China. I'll give him his due on Taiwan. The trade war, I'm not sure about that. I'm not sure if that necessarily is the best way to be assertive with China. I think there's better ways. And as for the weaker concentration camps, Mike Pompeo's been vocal about that. Donald Trump advocated it. He actually said it sounded like a good idea. And may history record that. And the economy, strong economy, well, it's an economy that's rising unemployment, looming recession. And okay, that might not be entirely Donald Trump's fault. It's something the whole world's going to face. It does, counter one of his claims. Diplomacy. Well, the Singapore summit was proven to be a big mistake. And if that was Obama, incidentally, you can imagine the response that Trump supporters would come out with. They'd be calling him a communist. They'd be calling him all the names under the sun. But when Trump does it, it's somehow statesmanship. But at best, it showed Trump to be pretty naive. It was almost a Neville Chamberlain moment, actually. It's very obvious Kim was taking him for a ride, and it should have been obvious from the start. Trump has praised Putin. He's denigrated Western allies. I just don't understand how anyone can vocally defend this man with the number of things that he's come out with. Even in areas where you could sort of give him credit, like, okay, he's been assertive on Iran, but he still threatened to bomb cultural sites, which was a disgrace. Um, I just don't understand how anyone could defend this man. Donald Trump is not a natural bulwark against woke politics. He's a liability. If you are a reasonable centrist person, or a moderate, or a reasonable centre-right person, I mean, look at the number of Republicans turning against Trump. That's why I don't believe it's a left-right issue. There's many conservatives who have a problem with Trump, with good reason. Trump is not some sort of brave, heroic figure standing up against the establishment. He's a narcissist, only interested in his own size of his rallies. What other president boasts about that? I just can't. Obama didn't, Bush didn't, Clinton didn't. The sort of narcissism, you can dismiss it. I think it's actually relevant when we're talking about such a powerful and prominent position. So I sincerely hope Trump's kicked out of office. Biden may not be a great president, but I honestly don't think what we're not going to see from Biden is a sort of reckless attacks on a free press, the sort of reckless insults against allies, and the sheer contempt for democracy that this president has. Um, so I hope beyond hope that come November, Trump is kicked out. I'll be very tempted to say then he'll be a stone cold loser. But Trump's brought politics to the gutter and it's up to Biden to get it out. Biden's been compared to Gerald Ford, and it may be that he's a Gerald Ford type figure. Probably won't be an outstanding president, but he's a decent man who will, in my opinion, hopefully clean up some of the mess that Trump's created in terms of the dangerous way he has attacked Western institutions. Trump is not a defender of the West, and I think it's a big mistake to think that he is. It's what I notice a lot of Trump supporters seem to think that he's saving the free world. I think I'm not convinced of that at all. I think almost everything Trump does is motivated by what's in it for Donald Trump. I think his record shows it.